it's getting sent. Then I'm going to put it back to speaker view.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go excuse myself and start tagging things.
I think we're live on Facebook now, buddy.
All right. Have a good
evening, Facebook. My name's Chuck Fagan, and this is a special presentation of the Better Savannah Facebook page. Better Savannah is Chatham County area's leading independent political action committee, expenditure committee rather, focused on progressive policy outcomes here at the local level. Tonight, we're going to have a follow-up interview with the nominee for the Republican Party for the chairman of the Chatham County Commission. We are speaking with former Mayor of Tybee Island, Jason Buelterman. Unfortunately, the Democratic nominee declined to participate in tonight's event. We regret that, but we do wish him the best nonetheless. Jason, it's been a couple months since we talked before the primaries. How's the summer been? How's it out there on the campaign trail? Give us an introduction.
Sure. Well, things are going well. I mean, it's obviously an odd time to be campaigning. Everybody's going through this unique time in American history, and things are going well as far as the campaign goes. I really would have liked to have had the opportunity to be attending events, and shaking hands and kissing babies, all that stuff that people who are running out for office do. I really enjoy getting out there and talking to folks, and it's just been different. We did start canvassing and going door to door just in the past week or so, and that has been going well. I was kind of reluctant to do that, honestly, because many people, I think, are reluctant to have a stranger knock on their door during the middle of a global pandemic. But that was a fear I had. But what I found is you knock on the door, you back up a little bit, and most of the people that you talk to are happy to have visitors, as long as you maintain social distance and all that kind of stuff. So, but things are going well. I'm enjoying it. I think there's 48 days left, I think, to election day. And not that I'm counting, but the interesting thing about this one is so many people, I think, are going to vote absentee. Traditionally, you kind of really gear up a lot of your activities in the weeks leading up to the election day. With this, though, a lot of people are going to be getting their ballots next week. So right. Really, you got to spread out your advertising and your messaging and all that, not just 2 weeks before election day, but all throughout, the month of September. And you see that on TV right now. My gosh, there's so many hit ads and negative ads going on. Every time you turn on the TV, it's John Ossoff and it's Purdue and all this stuff. So it's just a unique time to be running, but we're adjusting accordingly.
Well, we appreciate you joining us tonight. And I know that it's tough in such a unique year to be campaigning, especially in a countywide election. I want to ask you first, as we get into some policy questions. As you know, we're all about the policy here at Better Savannah. I want to ask you some updates to questions we talked about in the primaries. Since the primaries, Chatham County did come in to institute a mask mandate, so to speak. Of course, we lost Commissioner Holmes since we last spoke to COVID-19. What are your thoughts on the county's leadership since we last spoke, the mask mandates, where we go from here with COVID-19? We feel the chairman's role is very powerful in emergency times, and I'm interested in your perspective.
Sure. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm running. I've tried very hard to not campaign in a way that is in any way critical of the current chairman at all. I'm just trying to focus on the style of leadership that I would bring. And what my approach to things is to first and foremost communicate with the public consistently. I don't think you need to go overboard necessarily, but I think it's important that the public knows exactly what's going on. I think the city of Savannah did a good job of being, Mayor Johnson, I think, did a good job of communicating regularly with the public. And when he put into force the mask mandate, and then there was that lag with the county. So there was this period of time where people were kind of confused, is the Walmart I'm shopping at, is that in unincorporated Chatham or is that in the city of Savannah? Do I need to wear a mask, et cetera? Since then, a lot of companies have taken it upon themselves to implement mandates on their own. But I would have supported what the mayor did. I would have kind of joined forces with him and tried to get some kind of a countywide, with unincorporated and the 8 municipalities, they have something consistent. So we're all on the same sheet of music with respect to that. But that with that particular issue relative to a mask mandate, maybe you wouldn't have had the caseload that we are experiencing now in Chatham County.
You know, it does seem that our caseloads have, you know, somewhat flattened. They may not be going down as much as we want them, but they certainly don't appear to be moving upward. You know, as a leader, you know, I'm of course not asking your opinion as an employee of the school system, but are you concerned about returning the students back to school too quickly? Is that a major concern of yours?
I think that, you know, obviously I need to stay in my lane on this issue. That's a school board issue, superintendent issue, but they are being put in an exceptionally difficult position. They are in a no-win situation. No matter what they do, they're going to take criticism from, I guess, one side or the other. I know there's a lot of Facebook groups and stuff that are supportive of coming back to school, and there's others that are starting to chime in now that are opposed to it, some at least. So I don't know. It's a tough situation. The unfortunate thing is I don't think this country should be in this position right now. We should not be in a position 7 months into this thing where you're putting school board members like these poor people in this horrible position of having to make such a difficult decision. That's my assessment, is they're reaping the unfortunate consequences of our country failing to contain this thing.
I hear you loud and clear. Let me ask you a little bit of a follow-up there that I think you'll agree with, hopefully. You know, if you win and you are sworn in January, we are likely to still be in the thick of this. I think most of us feel that we will not likely be out of the woods yet when you are inaugurated. If you were to win, you know, if we still haven't returned to school, I mean, you know, would you welcome collaboration with the top leaders of the other governmental bodies? I'm trying to remember the last time I can remember when the chairman of the county commission, the president of the school board, and the mayor of Savannah, you know, all had some public dialogue that was anything substantial. You know, do you think that's something as a culture you can change?
Well, one of the primary reason I'm running is because I feel like there has been a bit of a lack of collaboration. I think we saw that abundantly clear with the demerger of the police department. And we talked about this when we all talked a few months ago before the primary. I'm not arguing at all that we need to open that can of worms again. And I think that a lot of people in unincorporated Chatham are very pleased with the new county police department and their chief and their staff. I think they're doing a good job. However, I think that thing could have been resolved amicably to the benefit of the city of Savannah and satisfy the need for better services and response times in unincorporated Chatham County. So I'm running because of that. I also saw firsthand with Hurricane Matthew and Irma the importance of collaboration when it comes to emergency response. I was very frankly frustrated with how especially some reentry decisions were made and communicated to me personally. So, you know, I'm a big believer in collaboration and teamwork, and you know, that's how you move the ball forward. And especially in a time of emergency, you really can't be having turf battles over ridiculous things.
Let me ask you a question, Jason. You know, last time we talked, I know we told you, you know, about the dramatic outcome in the city elections last year in Savannah. And as we've seen, that dramatic election outcome has produced some drama. You know, it does appear that there will be a significant change on the commission, although not quite as dramatic of a change as was in the city of Savannah during their elections. You know, what are you looking at and surveying, you know, now that the primaries have concluded and the runoffs have concluded in District 2 and District 5, you know, what are you surveying in terms of who's going to be on the commission? You know, have you had any conversations with any other candidates about policies and ideas since we last spoke?
A little bit, you know, honestly, everybody's so focused on winning their races right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to pay attention to forums like this. I wasn't able to watch your 6th district one last night, but I have watched some others that your organization and others have done. But the conversations I've had with the other candidates are simply, and I've made a point of calling all of them and reaching out to all of them in advance of the primary, in advance of the runoff that we recently had. Wish them good luck. Told them I look forward to working with them if they win. But relative to drilling down to policy issues, I haven't talked too much. I have had some conversations with some leaders in Savannah about some opportunities if I were to be able to win, to collaborate on some initiatives that we share a common interest in.
Good. Great. John, you want to kick off another question for us?
Sure. Jason, you know, there's a big kerfuffle over at, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I got you.
Okay. The city council had, since Floyd Adams, operated on a procedural basis in terms of bringing forth policy topics for discussion amongst the council in a pretty simple fashion. And it was the same when I was on the county commission. And that is, if you make a request to the city manager or county manager prior to the legal publishing date of the next meeting's agenda, under your name, you could put pretty much anything you wanted. That has changed, and that they have instituted a rules for a council package that mandates that you got to have, if you're a council person, a commissioner, an alderman, you got to have 5 other, yourself and 4 other people for a total of 5 to put something on the agenda. And we find this, you know, detrimental to good process and open government. If you were to get elected, are you content with the status quo of just allowing a commissioner in a timely fashion to put a topic on your agenda for public discussion?
Yeah, I mean, they are representing their district, and they've been duly elected by the citizens, and I don't see any reason why not. The big thing that I know that I experienced on Tybee was timing. A lot of times I'd have requests to put things on the agenda last minute, and therefore staff was unable to adequately prepare for it. And then the public was unaware of it. You know, if it was put on the agenda late, and they wouldn't have an opportunity to comment on it because something's added too late. So that you know, I tried to hold the line on that as best I could on Tybee. And would do the same with the county commissioners, asking them to have it submitted by a certain date, you know, in advance, whatever it is. I don't know what the rule is, 10 days or something like that before the commission meeting, so it can be vetted and staff can prepare for it. But to answer your question, my style of leadership is, if somebody wants to bring something up, they certainly can do that because they've been elected by their citizens and have the right and obligation to do that.
Right.
Let me ask you a follow-up question here, Jason, to this point, because I think we contend this is a major problem in the largest municipality right now. If a commissioner follows the rules and submits something to be discussed, and you disagree with it on a policy basis, you think that their policy idea is not something you would vote for, you can't see yourself supporting it, but that commissioner believes the opposite of you, right? If they follow the procedures to get something on the agenda, you know, can you foresee yourself, you know, blocking them because of that policy grounds and preventing the open debate and vote of such an idea?
Well, I don't want to say anything that looks like I'm critical of what Mayor Johnson's
Great
doing.
answer. That's a good answer.
But you know, how I would handle that is they wanted to put something on the agenda. I'd see it somehow through correspondence or email, and I'd give them a call, see if we can hash out something that's mutually agreed upon. But at the end of the day, if we can't come to an agreement and they want to put something on the agenda, they put something on the agenda, and we vet it with the public and staff and have at it.
And of course, we haven't even mentioned, of course, that you do still have the veto power as the chairman. You know, if it really is that detrimental, I think we're talking about open debate and democracy ideals, right? We want to see these issues. We lost your video there, Jason, for a second, but you're back. There we go. We want to see these issues debated by our elected representatives in open forum, and have the votes taken. If it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. But you know, I think at the very least, you know, we should have that open forum and debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just since you brought up the veto issue, something that I think not most people aren't aware of is the influence and power that the chairman has relative to mayors, particularly
Very
my
much correct.
situation on Tybee. There were a lot of things that happened on Tybee that had I had the power to veto it, I would have. But I didn't. I broke a tie. That's all I could do. If it was a tie vote, I'd break, that was the power that I had, other than the bully pulpit and some of the other emergency powers that I had. But the chairman has a significant amount of power with respect to controlling the agenda, although I would be very open to having items on there, even if I don't agree with it, and then the veto power, and then also the overall management of the county during times of emergency, whether it's a hurricane or like we're dealing with now, this pandemic.
Hey, thank you for those answers. Let me ask you one more, as long as I'm on the mound here. Recently, we read in the paper, Jason, the county manager and staff, I believe, is recommending that all residents in unincorporated Chatham County, an ordinance should be passed that requires them to sign up for fire services and sanitation trash services. I never really realized that it wasn't mandated. What's your thinking on that? Is that a good necessary thing, or leave it as it is?
On the trash thing, I don't, honestly, John, I haven't looked into this in as much depth as I would like to, but just knowing what I know about it and having a few conversations, reading the article in the paper, watching the commission proceedings about it, I don't, at this time at least, support the trash because I think some people, Pat Farrell made some good points that were in the newspaper about that. People should have a choice to take care of that kind of stuff themselves. Relative to the fire fee, that's a bad term for it. The mandated fire subscription service.
Sure.
One thing you don't want to do with that is create another fire fee, public conflagration, I guess you would say, to use a pun there, relative to the possibility of adding that. But I do think it's critically important that the people who are paying that fee, and that is a fee that's not a flat fee, it's a fee that is based on the valuation of your property, that those people who pay aren't
carrying the ones that aren't paying.
Aren't receiving less of a service when their house catches fire, their business catches fire, because people aren't paying the fee. I don't know how you can skin this cat, but I think there are some ways that it can be done possibly without mandating it. For example, it's my understanding that if your house catches fire, and you're not paying the subscription fee, that you not only have to pay Chatham Fire Services, $8,000 to $10,000, whatever costs them to fight the fire, and your insurance company may not cover your loss.
Good point.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So if you can convey that to people and they understand that, then you may not have to go the route of having a public fight over like Savannah did.
Yeah, you're advocating sounds like an intense public education push to get people to do the right thing and buy into the service and hold out any mandate pending how that works out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think if people knew that they weren't covered, I think they would pay mandate or no mandate.
You're probably right. There's probably a bunch of people that don't understand that it's a fee and you got to subscribe.
Yeah. But it's just not fair, in my view, to those people who are paying it, because therefore there's fewer dollars for personnel, there's fewer dollars for equipment. And there's some other issues with that too, relative to fire services and unincorporated, that I know that a lot of municipalities utilize SPLOST dollars to supplement the cost of having better equipment and fire pumpers and things like that. SPLOST money does not go to pay for fire equipment for Chatham Fire Services. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because therefore, if you live in a municipality that does that, then you have newer and more updated equipment relative if your house happens to catch fire on Wilmington Island.
Got it. Let me get one more in, and then I'm going to pass it back over to Chuck. Your wife asked me to ask you this question. I'm kidding. The county currently does not have any paid maternity leave policy. Would you support developing a policy, even if it's on a short-term basis, for the Chatham County employees?
I think I would. I mean, that was one of the questions you just added, one of the questions in red, I think, that you put on there. I'd have to look into it, but I would think that that would be something I would definitely be interested in looking at very, very seriously.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Jason, I want to turn to the topic of growth. I mean, I think coronavirus is obviously the #1 issue on a lot of people's minds locally and nationally in terms of short term. But I think a longer term issue is growth. You know, prior to Corona-19 virus, Chatham County over the past decade, really past 2 decades specifically, Jason, has experienced significant growth and business expansion. Yet the poverty rate is essentially unchanged over that same time period. The question that I asked very pointedly last evening, and excuse the dog in the background, obviously, the point that I made last evening was that what is the value of growth, of record growth, if the poverty rate's not going to change? What's the value of record growth in this county if the poverty rate remains the same?
Good question. I mean, we're at, as we discussed last time, we're at a 17.3% poverty rate. That's high relative to the communities and counties around us. Just, I looked this up, Fulton County in Atlanta, 16%. Bibb County has 27%. Muskogee is, which is Columbus, 19.4. So yeah, we're high. A lot of other communities are high as well. And it's only good. I can't imagine it's going to get any better in the next year or two with the impacts of coronavirus. But to answer your question, I think that's something we need to work on as a community to make sure that the growth that we're experiencing benefits everybody and not just some. But how you do that is tough. How do you do that? There's ways to do it. It's just is a long, slow process of working together within the municipalities in Chatham County, with the nonprofits, with the school system, to try to figure out a way to bring that down. So if we bring it from, let's just say 17.3 to 15.3, that doesn't sound like much, but that's 6,000 people we're bringing off poverty level. That's a big deal. So if we can move if we can move the needle on that ever so slightly in the right direction going forward for the next 4 years, we will have made a huge impact on the lives of a lot of people, because what's probably going to happen in most places around the country is the poverty rate's going to go up. So there's no simple solution to that, but I think it is all about collaboration, working together, having a long-term vision, and actually getting things done and not just talking about it.
Well, I think when you look at the headlines the last, many years, especially the last 4 or 5 years, it's constantly things like the following: record tonnage at the port, record enrollment at Savannah College of Art and Design, record number of visitors to Chatham County and Savannah in the tourism industry, record number of development and permits, right? The city of Savannah pumped up the 2018 numbers of 500 million, but they won't even tell you that we're on pace to outdo that 2018 previous high this year in 2020 during coronavirus. We're on pace to tap 500 million in permitted construction and development just inside the city of Savannah. So for anyone who thinks that we're gonna, crash in real estate or whatever, that's just not going to happen. In some other markets it may, but I think we're on pace for another solid decade of record growth. And I'm not sure that, what's the population right now, John, in Chatham County? 200-something thousand?
90. Oh, the
total? Yeah.
290, I think.
A little under 300. A
little bit under 300. So if we're at 17% poverty with 300,000 people, I'm finding it hard to believe that we're going to stomach 17.3% poverty at 400,000 residents.
Yeah, that's
going to be a harder challenge.
That's 50,000 people. 50,000 people. That's unacceptable. We need to talk about it more. We need to work on it more. I see it. I have this unique perspective. I was mayor of Tybee. Most people know that. But I also work in the public school systems at a Title I school, and I see a lot of people who are affected by this who are young, and we've got to figure out a way to bring that poverty rate down. I wish I had the simple solution for it. I don't, but I will say that it will be one of my key objectives is to figure out a way to address that issue head on and help to ensure that the prosperity that we experience in Chatham County is felt by as many people as possible. I can't imagine living in poverty.
I believe you when you say that. Let me ask you a follow-up that might help our viewers understand where you would stand with some of the interest, because from our perspective, Jason, it's been a great 2 decades to be a business owner in Chatham County. It's been a great 2 decades to be a developer, a great 2 decades to be a builder. It's not been a great 2 decades to be a poor person in Chatham County. And like you said, we're trying to focus on changing that. As you mentioned, running countywide is a tough thing to do. It is hard. You have to raise money. Some of the people that you'll raise money from, undoubtedly, so will your Democratic opponent, right? It's not a partisan thing. Will come from interests that will have to be impacted one way or another by change to stop the 17.3% poverty at 100,000 more residents. When it comes to policies like increased zoning, impact fees on new construction, these are things that are going to impact people, and industries that may or may not be supporting you. And when these things come up, which are sound public policy used by tens of counties and cities around this state, they're coming from an interest perspective and not a public policy perspective. Where are you going to draw the line on what's good for somebody's interests, their own industry's interest, and what's good for the county as a whole?
You got to use your own judgment. Do the best you can. I mean, we had impact fees put on at Tybee while I was on council and while I was mayor that I advocated for. Now, those were specifically tied to infrastructure improvements. And I know that you had sent me the information about Sandy Springs. I looked at that very closely. That's something that I would be willing to consider. I also think that if you have, you talked about the ports and the growth of the ports and how that maybe isn't having a positive effect on many people in the county, but it is having a positive effect on the ILA and the people who work at the ports, people in the logistics industry, and the people that they hire. I don't necessarily think that the growth of the ports hasn't had a positive impact on wide swaths of the population in Chatham County. I think it has. I think tourism has had a positive impact on many aspects of our economy and has helped a lot of people out. It's just, how do you devise policies from the top down, from the government, that are going to help people achieve better results? So I look at what happened in Atlanta, in East Lake area of Atlanta, where you had some private money come in, and they have done some really amazing things that did not gentrify the area, but rather improve the schools, improve the recreational infrastructure, made so many high impact improvements on the quality of life of the people who live there. There's a similar effort that's based on that model for the east side of downtown Savannah, that is partnering with the YMCA, partnering with the city of Savannah through what they're doing at East Broad by setting up an early learning center, partnering with the school system to really do something for that community, similar to what was done in other places like in Atlanta. And you need government to get on board with that and partner with folks and make things happen. And it just takes work and persistence and time. There's no magic solution to it. It's just a lot of work and commitment to getting it done.
May I?
One second, John. I want to ask him a follow-up, because at the beginning of your last answer, you laid out the premise of, these institutions and these things have been overall net positive for Chatham County and its residents. And I understand the various arguments. I really do. I think my direct question is, do you believe do you subscribe to the economic principle of diminishing returns, right? Is there a point at which a policy is no longer in the best interest? can we sustain double-digit growth at the port for the next 20 years with
Right.
the same poverty rate, with the same, you know, I mean, how many more people have to die in trucker accidents? I'm sure the attorneys love it and the insurance companies hate it. But, you know, I mean, these are the various things I'm talking about. It's not just about, you know, attacking these institutions and quote unquote taking from them. It's about balancing, you know, their success with the impact on the broader residents, and most specifically the most vulnerable residents. So I always want to give you a chance to respond, of course, but I really want to drill down on that. Do you not understand or believe in the diminishing returns point?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the city of Atlanta, not to pick on Atlanta, but I think there is an example of growth for the sake of growth without any plans, minimal planning, and the impact it's had on traffic, the impact it's had on people's quality of life. I think we see that happening to some extent in our community. And, you know, we need to do a better job of planning for growth and not just saying, hey, let's have another planned development somewhere just for the sake of doing it, increasing the tax base and bringing in more revenue to the municipalities, the county, the school system, et cetera. So long story short, I think we just need to do a better job of planning and working together. I know this sounds like a generalized answer, but I don't see just continuing to add more and more streets and widening the highways and doing all these other things. I don't see that as the solution. I think that takes away from what makes Savannah such a great place to begin with. We don't need to become a mini Atlanta just because we're growing and we're having so much success. I think we need to have some planned growth and do more to help the people who are struggling the most. I think there are a lot of good things happening in our community. And I used to think when I started in government, when I was 27, I first got elected, I thought, you know what, one day, you know, if we do all these things right, all of our problems are going to melt away and it's going to be a utopian perfect. Everything's going to be great. And I realize now that I'm 47, you know, that things are not all, they're never going to be perfect. There's always going to be another problem, another obstacle to overcome. But you can make some significant improvements if you have smart government. That's what I want to bring to the table is smart, collaborative government that has a vision, that plans ahead and isn't reactive, but rather plans in advance of development for transportation and a whole slew of other things that I think can be done a little bit better to make our community a better place.
Chuck, let me
Go
jump
ahead.
in. Fine. Jason, I understand it's never going to be perfect. We all do. But I want to maintain that better policies is the pathway to better outcomes. For instance, and let's be specific, the Port of Savannah, Georgia Ports, up until 1995, paid the county $1.50 per TEU that transited in or out of the port. Okay, and that money was shared with Garden City and Port Wentworth, you know, the communities that had, you know, direct physical contact with the port. That reduction or elimination of container fees was done for economic development to make our port more competitive with Norfolk, Virginia, or New Jersey, New York, or Miami. So it was a well-intended, well thought out policy change to eliminate that fee. And it worked extremely well. The point that I think Chuck and I are trying to make and Better Savannah is trying to make is that we need to have a sunset point in this plan that says, okay, we want to jumpstart business and give it an edge. We'll eliminate the fee. And when we get to, you know, when we're up 30% in containers, we'll reinstitute that fee. I think our problem here is because of the influences of big business, if you will, for lack of better words, is when they get a perk or an incentive, it seems to be a permanent thing. And we can't continually subsidize permanent economic development unless our poverty rates are going down, unless our affordable housing is coming up. If the other problems, school participation and outcomes, if those meters and dials were being positively affected, I would say, okay, don't sunset it, don't bring it back. We're making progress. But to Chuck's earlier point is, 2-3 decades later, we haven't moved a lot of the important metrics here. And I think if you look at SCAD has 60 buildings off digest. And back in 1998, 9, when they were developing, sure, it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense into the 2000s. But at this point, most people kind of feel that SCAD's getting more than they're giving back. And I'm not saying they're not giving, just like the port, just like seated deals, all these things have some benefits. But if you're constantly subsidizing without metrics and adjustments, it's just one giveaway after another. So that there's not a question in there. That was just a random thought, but that's my view on it.
I understand.
How about a SPLOS question? Can I hit you with a SPLOS?
Actually, I wanted to give him a chance to respond, because I have an idea of what your answer would be. And the answer is probably going to be somewhere along the lines of, well, we gave up the control to the state, and I'm running for chairman of the county, and I'm going to have limited influence on the outcome there. Would that be somewhere along the lines of what you would probably think?
A little bit. I mean, certainly the county chairman and the commission has some influence in terms of lobbying. It is not in the county's wheelhouse. That's not necessarily in their jurisdiction. I would also say that if we just got done talking about the poverty rate. If you hit the ports and with a container fee, and as a consequence, the ports either stops growing so much or some of the the shipping companies go elsewhere as a result, then you might be thinking you're helping in one area, but you're hurting another area, and the poverty rate goes up as a result, because some of the folks who are in logistics, who are at the ILA, who work directly for the Ports Authority, are negatively impacted. So it's tough. I mean, government is not an easy, there's no easy solutions in government. I would, obviously we all wish there was, or we'd have a zero poverty rate. But I would be very hesitant to lobby for adding port container fees, because of the possibility that could have a negative impact on our already too high poverty rate.
I find that hard to buy into. I don't want either of us to speak for ILA 1414. They for sure can speak for themselves. But having come from a union, perhaps the union town of Detroit, Michigan, I could tell you that if I was the business manager of a union, I would not be overall excited at the prospect of growing my membership from, say, 1,500 members to 2,500 members, because now I'm responsible for those 2,500 members and their incomes, right? I think you should reach out to them. I think they'd welcome a dialogue with you. I think you'd be surprised at their answer to this very issue. And the reason I say that is because I've done that reaching out. I've reached out to various members of there. I think there's a very good understanding, even in those organizations that are directly impacted by that entity, that if they don't have a fairer deal, it's not good if they make it out of poverty and 20% stay in the city of Savannah. I think there's an understanding there. But on the state issues, and again, I'm not trying to set you up to attack Al Scott here, but the current chairman did say, we don't need a lobbyist the last 8 years, because I've been in politics 45 years, and Chatham County has not had a lobbyist at the session in Atlanta for 8 years. Do you think that's a problem? And then the other question here is, our perspective, we think the delegation in general, we think that the county has never really had a great relationship with the delegation and hasn't, even tried some of these ideas at the state level. So your thoughts?
Yeah. So your comment about the lobbyists segues back to our discussion that we just had about the ports. I don't think that the way to get more from the ports to mitigate the impact that they have here locally is through container fees. I think it is through going to the state and being more aggressive and more purposeful in lobbying for funds to come back to Chatham County, because it is a state entity. I would rather the money come from them than come from a fee that could have a negative impact on the people who work at the ports and work in associated industries. And relative to the lobbyists, I think that, on Tybee, and I took heat for this. We had a lobbyist in Washington, but the amount of money we paid that lobbyist was so infinitesimally small relative to the amount of money that they brought back. It was a tiny, tiny fraction of what we paid that lobbyist relative to what we got back specifically for beach renourishment from the federal government. Mm-hmm. So I think it makes sense, although the word lobbyist, when you're running for office, is not one you necessarily want to use.
Not the best connotation.
Yeah, it's got a negative connotation, very negative connotation, but it's effective. It's been proven to work. And I think the county ought to open the dialogue. The county ought to put out an RFP for lobbying services at the state level, bottom line.
I gotta tell you, I love what you just said there, but in terms of the port, it just sounds a lot like, the fourth grade child, comes home and says, the fifth grader bully keeps bullying me. And your idea here is to keep opening up the dialogue with the bully. The state of Georgia is a $30 billion, $26 billion a year entity. Our combined, municipal and county governments at most, including capital projects, are what? 1.1, 1.2 billion. It's David and Goliath. I think you're going to have a stronger backbone to stand up to the state government.
Well, I'll give you an example, if I may, about
Please.
How I dealt with the ports, mm-hmm. with the impact that they had on Tybee. So
on the beach, yes. On
the beach. So there was a study that was done. It took us years and years of convincing the Army Corps of Engineers, who are the ones that do the digging for the maintenance and the deepening of the shipping channel, that the reason the Tybee's beach eroded so much was because of the fact that there was this man-made trench between Georgia and South Carolina and the Savannah River. So when they went for, I was mayor when all of the things were going on relative to deepening, and all the mitigation monies were put into the state and federal budget to deal with the damages or negative impacts environmentally and otherwise due to the deepening. And so I was pressed by a whole lot of people to take a very aggressive stance against the Ports Authority, to fight against it, to argue that by deepening it, you are going to have more of an impact on the erosion of Tybee's beach. And my decision was not to do that. It would not be productive to go that route. And we have gone through 3 cycles of beach renourishments where the city of Tybee Island essentially had to contribute next to nothing. And we have a very wide, healthy beach. And now we're in hurricane season and it's protecting us. So I'm all about what works. And that proved to be very effective, not just because of me, but because of the leadership and the teamwork we had on Tybee to get things done. And we had a good relationship with our state legislatures, and we had a lobbyist in Washington who helped get us done. But we didn't get it done by having a knockdown drag out with the ports, which we were quite frankly probably going to lose anyway, because we were the little city of Tybee and they were the ports.
Small municipalities, absolutely. I'll ask one more. I'm gonna take one more crack at this, John. Then I'm gonna let you ask your boss questions, just because it's hard for me to let it go. You just literally stated you're for what works, right?
Right.
So every major port in this country has municipal fees, just about every legitimate port, right? Charleston, Norfolk, New York, California, Long Beach. California Long Beach, for example, charges $46 to $50 per container that comes. That's the busiest port in the entire world, right? So I guess I struggle with how you can balance those two things, where you're saying you want to do what works, and this policy works elsewhere. We're not asking for $47. We would settle for the $1.50 that we had 20 years ago. And I don't think that would make Savannah overnight uncompetitive compared to the rest of what's available in the market. We're not suggesting to become California. I think we're just suggesting to come in line with most of the rest of the Eastern Seaboard.
Right.
on
I hear
course.
you, but if the powers that be years ago hadn't done what John talked about, which is to take away those fees, would we?
Thank Mayor Deloach.
Is it conceivable that we would have an 18.1% poverty rate right now? I don't know. I don't think there's any way to answer that question. But the fact that it's not there, all I see is the evidence of the growth. We've had a significant, obviously, amount of growth.
I'll do you even one better. I'll do you even one better. Do you think we would have had as many property tax increases the last 20 years if we hadn't faced it, if that hadn't been a permanent? I mean, you see how those questions work both ways.
Yeah,
right?
I do, and you see how they work both ways.
That's right.
It's a good argument, and you make some very valid points. I hear you. We just see it a little bit differently.
It's okay.
Something I want to mention too about Steve. There's a lot of talk about property taxes and how they go up and up and up. But if you own your home and you're homesteaded in Chatham County, at least for your county taxes, it stays the same. Unless they raise the millage.
Right.
But the backdoor tax increases of increased assessments on your home, if you live there, those are no more. That was in my opinion, a big step in the right direction to keep people in their houses. With all of the development and all the money and all the property valuations going up, we saw it on Tybee big time, and other places experience it. You still have people able to stay in their homes that they bought for $20,000. It's now worth $500,000. I love Stevens Day. I'm a big supporter of it. And I'm pushing back just a little bit because progress has been made on that issue. And that has helped a lot of people, myself included. I tell Ron a lot, thank you for Stevens Day. I think it's great. It's one of the reasons I'm able to stay in my house on Tybee, even though I'm a high school teacher.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said there, by the way. Go ahead, John.
Just a postscript before we go on to the SPLOST question, Jason. I don't want you to think that we are stuck hard and fast on container fees per se. We've talked to some members of the delegation about this subject, and they have said, well, what if the state gave more to the county in transportation funding? Would that make up for it? And the answer is sure. It doesn't have to come off the container model like it did up until the mid 90s. If the state wants to generate funding that goes directly to the county and call it something else, that's fine. All we're trying to do is not do business as usual and improve outcomes, whether it's education or poverty. Let me go on to SPLOST.
I agree 100%, John. And let me just real quick. So the way we skim that cat on Tybee is we worked our good relationships with our delegation in Atlanta. A study committee was put together at the state Senate level to deal with the impacts of the ports and the shipping channel was having on Tybee. And out of that study committee came a recommendation that the state pays 30% of beach renourishment costs going forward. The feds kick in 60%, so you're left with 10% local. That's how we dealt with it. We just dealt with it through good relationships and trying to actually get things done that had a positive impact on our community. And it's worked. It's been proven to work over the last 15 or so years since that study committee was put together. So a similar model what you're talking about might be the way to deal with this.
Great. Okay, SPLOST. Half your budget basically is SPLOST funding capital projects, right?
Half the budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, a big chunk of the majority of the capital budget SPLOST.
Well, compared to your M&O budget, they're kind of
similar.
They're both $250 million a year.
Right.
So here's where I'm going with this, Jason. And I'm in favor of SPLOST, but take one project as an example for discussion. The Aquatic Center was a 1996 capital improvement project, SPLOST project, that cost just south of $5 million at the time. the current maintenance and operation cost for the aquatic center is $1.2 million a year. That's not SPLOST eligible. That comes straight out of your M&O budget. That's property taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So considering that clearly big capital projects have an ongoing maintenance and operation cost attached to their finality, don't you think in terms of transparency and good faith that the voters ought to be able to know some projected M&O maintenance and operation costs for these SPLOST projects before they vote on the next SPLOST renewal? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, we should be as transparent as possible, especially with SPLOST, because SPLOST goes away if the public loses confidence in it.
Has
So
there
yeah,
ever been a SPLOST vote that failed? I guess the T-SPLOST is the last one I can think of, huh?
well, Glenn County lost their special purpose local option sales tax a few years ago, and they'd become so dependent upon that tax that they were left with basically no capital budget. So
Okay,
yeah,
second SPLOST question. I'm trying to pick the pace up here just a bit. And we've talked about this in the past, and that is one of the public's and the voters' big frustrations is how long it takes to do a SPLOST project. I'm not going to pick on the arena. The arena is a perfect example of a project that's over 20 years old and just now getting started. The county has the same example in the way of the Montgomery Street Judicial Courthouse. That was 2002 fully funded SPLOST renovation. They never spent the money on the courthouse. They diverted the money to adjacent buildings, the new Pete Lukakis building, et cetera, et cetera. Jay Jones, in his run, suggested that one good fix might be to write an ordinance attached to SPLOST going forward, not past SPLOST projects, but SPLOST 8 and beyond, that would kind of be a Stevens Day kind of deal where if the project is supposed to be started within 4 years and finished within 6, if it's not started in the 4th year, it seems to me that project ought to be revisited in terms of, is it feasible? Do we still need it? Maybe it's longer, maybe it's 8 years. The arena is certainly something that 20 years ago probably made a lot of sense. And today we're kind of scratching our heads saying, wow, that's buggy whips in the age of the automobile because, you know, COVID and whatnot. So how about a SPLOST reform effort at the county level, since it is a county sales tax collection, to put some sort of mechanism in place to ensure delivery of the projects in a timely fashion?
yeah, putting a shot clock on SPLOST projects, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shot clock, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I
Good.
think that would increase public confidence in SPLOST. I support it as well, because the statistics are, and whether or not these are exactly accurate, but about 40% of the proceeds from SPLOST come from people outside of the county, and those projects would otherwise have to be funded by property tax collections. So yeah, I think Jay he was onto something there, and it's something that I would definitely look into seriously.
Good.
And there's there's money left over from SPLOST from a long time ago that still hasn't even been spent yet.
Yeah. Yep.
So and the money you said $250 million. I think the SPLOST, is my understanding, brings in about $500 million for its entirety. That's the projection roughly. And the county gets only a fraction of that because a lot of it goes to the city and et cetera. So the county doesn't get that much, but it is a significant chunk of their capital budget. Let me just real quick, one other thing about M&O costs. I think there is a way to make sure, two things on SPLOST with M&O is I think there's ways to use alternative energy, solar panels, et cetera, geothermal to make ongoing M&O costs go down long term. That's a big investment up front, but it saves money long term. A lot of homeowners can't do that because they don't have the money up front, but government does. I think that makes sense. But solar panels on, we did geothermal out here to power 100-year-old city hall building.
Yeah.
And then secondly, another M&O cost issue is when you skimp, when you do your set up your matrix for your bid process, if so much of it is weighed on the bottom line cost, and you go after the cheapest contractors and the cheapest subs, then you wind up having to make repairs. You know, you look at the Brooklyn Bridge, and that thing was built, and there ain't a crack in the foundation. It was built right, you know.
Well,
and it frustrates me when buildings are built now, and it's like, oh, they got a 50-year lifespan. Really? Why is that? And so that was one of the reasons I got the endorsement of the unions, the Central Labor Council. I got their endorsement. I was very happy and pleased about that. I was a little surprised about that, but I was happy with that. Well, I think because we talked about how much money is spent in M&O costs going back and fixing projects that were paid for with SPLOST because they weren't done right the first time because they didn't hire qualified local labor to do it. So that was two things: better alternative energy to make M&O costs go down, and then making sure you don't just go with the lowest price contractor and sub to do projects.
I got to tip my hat to you, Jason. The whole concept of using solar panels, those solar panels are SPLOST eligible. Mm-hmm. So utilizing the SPLOST funding to reduce M&O costs going forward is very brilliant. I think that's a good call.
Yeah, we're not reinventing the wheel here. They've done it elsewhere. You know, there's no reason why we can't do it here. You know, Baxley, Georgia has this amazing solar panel project that they put at their wastewater treatment plant. I talked to the city manager up there a few times. That thing's saving them a fortune in the long term. That's Baxley. That's not, you know, the place where you would expect to see a big alternative energy project, but they're doing it because it saves them money.
Let me ask you a question here, Jason. You've been pretty steadfast in not wanting to raise property taxes. And believe it or not, this issue is a very bipartisan issue locally. You know, the Democrats and Republicans have been very unified on keeping property taxes low for especially homeowners, primary occupancy homeowners, right? You know, during a 4-year term, you're likely to see a hit to the digest at some point. Probably not next year, probably the year after, because of how all of that digesting works, as you know. If you're hesitant to go after the poor, and you're hesitant for impact fees or franchise fees, and you don't want to raise taxes, are you going to be comfortable when the county manager comes to you with a plan of laying off 8 to 12% of the county staff? Is that the lean and mean county that you're foreseeing you're going to have to oversee?
No, I think you just got to be smart. Look, we went through, and I know that Tybee much smaller scale. However, I was mayor when we went through the near depression. It was a recession officially, but in the real estate market, it was a depression, right?
Yes.
In 2008, 2009, 2010, where our property tax digest on Tybee just went off the cliff. And we were able to get through that without furloughs, without laying folks off, just by being very careful and very conservative in how we did our budget. And we also at the time had very little money in our our reserves. And now we have built up about 10 months worth of reserve. Wow. Should we be hit by a hurricane or something like that? Hurricane, or we didn't
10 months of M&O operating reserves.
Yeah, we have 10 months in reserve. We started with next to nothing. So what we did is just by being smart, you know, we build up our reserve over time. We're in good shape, and I credit the county. You know, I know that you know, Al is not popular in some quarters, I guess, but I think he did do a good job of helping manage the budget. And the county now is to the point where they almost have that AAA bond rating, because one of the factors in getting that is that they have 30% of their annual budget sitting in reserve. They got about a $200 million budget for their general fund. They got about $60 million sitting aside. They've done good. I would want to continue that. I think it is doable. I think you just got to be smart. You got to look out for your employee pension costs. Make sure those don't go out of whack. Not by cutting them, but just by making sure that you contribute enough to it so that 5 years down the road, you don't have to contribute 20% of their salary instead of contributing 12% to their salary. You got to make sure you look out for the ongoing. One of the issues the county does have is healthcare. They have an issue with the commitments they've made to their employees upon their retirement before Medicare kicks in terms of taking care of their health care. I wouldn't want to eliminate that at all for any of the current employees, but I think we do need to look in the interest of the taxpayer for the person who's the chairman 16 or 18, 25 years from now, deal with that now by looking at new hires, so they're not stuck with that's a little bit of a ticking time bomb with the county budget, but it's a ticking time bomb that's a long way off before it goes off, but it needs to be dealt with now, just like the Fed should have dealt with Social Security somehow 20 years ago, and that's a ticking time bomb. It's the same type of thing. So the short answer to your question is I think you can do it by being smart. I think there is a way to do it. We did it on Tybee on a smaller scale. I think it could be done at the county as well.
It's a good answer. I think unless we get a bailout from the feds for states and counties and municipalities, I think we're in for a very rough few years in funding local governments.
Yeah, the cities are worse. The cities are in worse shape than the county because they're much more dependent upon sales tax revenue. The county's going to be in trouble, but I don't think we're going to be near as much trouble financially as, for example, the city of Savannah. And that's not their fault.
To Chatham County. What do you think happens to Chatham County if the city goes bankrupt here?
Oh, I have no idea. That thought has never crossed my mind. I don't know.
Do we have time? Can we touch on affordable housing?
That's the last topic I wanted to get to. Go ahead, John.
Okay. Jason, in the SPLOST 7 that we voted on in November and passed, the county is getting $216 million is the county's cut over the next 5 years in SPLOST 7. The city's draw is $165 million. All of that, of course, was projected pre-COVID. So those numbers are probably going to be appreciably off and down. However, the city of Savannah earmarked $10 million of their SPLOST 7 funds to develop and fund affordable housing projects and initiatives. I say this, it's an opinion. Regrettably, Chatham County, even though they got $70 million more, didn't fund one single dollar to affordable housing. You've talked about collaboration, closer collaboration with the city of Savannah, which is the biggest municipality. When we come around on your watch on SPLOST 8, will you work and endeavor to see that affordable housing has some traction in the next SPLOST 8?
Yeah, I think what Eddie and Van and Brian, that whole team on city council, you can criticize them all you want, but on that issue, yep. I think they hit a home run on that. I think it's a very innovative concept to use SPLOST dollars to help that use that as seed money, essentially similar to how this historic preservation happened in the city of Savannah to help with affordable housing. I love it. I'm going to watch that very carefully. And if it proves to be successful, that is definitely something I would want to replicate at the county level and partner with the city and other cities to help out on that issue, because we definitely have an affordable housing issue. We do not want to become some of these other communities where their affordable housing issue is at a crisis level. We're approaching that. Other communities are facing that right now.
Thank you. Chuck, you got anything?
No, I just want to point out, you've given us a full hour here. We really appreciate your time. I know that, we don't see eye to eye on everything, and nor should we. I do think that you're, obviously willing to hear us out, on the agenda that we clearly have. One thing your opponent said about in declining this interview was that, we were biased and had an agenda, and I think everybody does, and everybody should. The key thing in compromise is that everybody gets a little bit of something they're looking for. And I think the ideas we're presenting to this community have to be a part of a compromise going forward. It makes no sense to reject wholeheartedly everything that we're advocating for, because too many other cities and counties around the state and this country are already doing them to a great success. So, like you said, we're really kind of looking at best practices around the rest of the country and just trying to pick and hodgepodge potpourri our way to a better Savannah, a better Chatham County.
Yeah, take the best of what other communities have done and replicate that here. Absolutely is something that we need to do. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of good things going on, but I think we can continue to make improvements, and especially that poverty rate is unacceptably high, and it affects way too many of our friends and of our neighbors and people in our community. When my kids, when they wake up in the morning, my thing to them is 3 words: always be nice. If you're always nice to people, you're always respectful of people, even if they're ugly to you. The thing that makes bullies more mad than anything is when you kill them with kindness. That's always my philosophy. I try to instill that in my kids. And I don't always succeed, but I try to kind of live by that. And that's what I'll bring to the table as a chairman. And I brought it to the table as mayor, and I will do my best to continue that mentality and governance at the county level.
I want to thank you. I want to bid you farewell with this comment. The fact that you're willing to talk to us and address, really substantive, hard policy conversations is a credit to you. And you may be from a moderate to smaller size city in Chatham County, but your approach and style, I think, would bode really well. And the thought that I had, and I wrote it down, is to scale it up. What you've done really in your tenure at the city of Tybee is pretty remarkable, and you're willing to entertain new concepts, new policies. So I got to give you a lot of credit for it. And I say, just scale up. What you're doing is saying, hey, John, Chuck, I'm gonna be me and draw on my successes from Tybee as a good city. I'm just gonna scale up to the Chatham County level. So thanks for your time tonight.
We really appreciate you being here, and I want to say that for working with the other commissioners and the rest of the municipalities, everything like that here locally, I think your words of wisdom are wise. I think, always be nice is a great foot forward. But I caution you that when dealing, this is a $100 billion region, GDP. I mean, when you're dealing with institutional players, they don't want to give up what they have easily. And while you need to, I hate to quote Frank Underwood here, but while you need to shake hands with your right hand, you need to keep a rock in your left. They are not going to give up easy, Jason. And the compromises that we're seeking, they would call apocalyptic just because it's not in their own interests, So I caution you on buying into the rhetoric of what's good for, the ports or STIDA or SCAD or whoever is in the status quo. There's a reason they hold that. Those viewpoints. By and large, we have nothing to gain from this agenda. Personally, politically, professionally, we just think it's what's best. That's why we're promoting it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, another thing I tell my kids is to stand up for others. And so, be nice, but if somebody who is vulnerable is getting picked on, you got to stand up for them.
I love it. Well, tell people how to find your campaign on social media, anything you want to put out there. And then John will take us off of Facebook Live. Sure.
Bueltermanforchairman.com. We're out, knocking on doors, working hard, doing everything we can to get elected in this difficult, very difficult time. I'll just say too, I'm very blessed. I have 3 healthy kids. My wife and I both have jobs, but a lot of people are suffering right now. This is a difficult time. And I'll do the very best I can to lead us through what will be a turbulent couple of years, because this Corona situation, unlike some people saying it's going to go away on November 3rd, that ain't true. It's going to be with us for a little while, and we got to deal with it. And it's going to have budgetary impacts on the county. We got 2,107 county employees. I would be looking out for their interests as well as the taxpayer interests. So bueltermanforchairman.com, check it out. And, my phone number, my contact information is on there. Reach out to me anytime.
Well, again, we really appreciate you being here, and thank you all for joining us who viewed this event live, and to those of you who will have viewed it on replay countless times thereafter. Wish you the best of luck. The mayor of Tybee Island, Jason Buelterman. John, why don't you take us on out?
You got it, Chuck.